Hi, everyone. Welcome to Business is Politics. I'm Joseph Lavoie. This week, I'm actually going to focus on one theme across the three episodes. I'm delighted to actually have two of my colleagues, Jason Craik and Hunter Knifton, join me this week. And what we talk about is the need to look at electoral maps. You've heard me talk about this before. We have a very compelling election in British Columbia, and we are using it as a prime example of why every business should be paying attention to the electoral maps. Today's focus is how demographics can shift election outcomes and why business needs to pay attention to that. I hope you enjoy it. Let's get to the show.
I think as this redistribution has happened and the population growth, we've had over 100,000 people move to British Columbia over the last, 12 to 18 months. Looking at those maps is going to be more and more important. And I think right now, to points that Hunter made, it's a little bit of a grab bag of what we can decipher from them because there has been such a big redistribution, because there's been mass demographic changes that we don't really understand yet. I think the data and the voting data that we're going to collect on this election will be extremely important to every party going forward in the next 2-3 cycles until there's the next redistribution. Looking at poll by poll inside of ridings is going to become even more and more important as we look at more efficiency and needing to get the vote out in a more efficient way. But I think anybody who is interested in how policy is shaped and how policy is influenced should spend some time looking at the electoral maps after this cycle and understanding where the votes have broken out in sort of those key battlegrounds and what those issues they were voting for meant to them, and being able to tailor make your campaigns and your policy asks to that. So yeah, maps aren't sexy, but they're really the core tenet of what we do in campaigning.
Yeah, I mean, so often we talk about war. We talk about war rooms. We use war analogies when we talk about politics.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to wage a war, you got to look at your maps, right? And there's an element of that. But to me, it seems like the map, like the change of pace is occurring in between election cycles is so rapid, whether it's media consumption habits and how that shapes people's perceptions, how it shapes their vote intent, or even what they're focused on. And then you throw in what we've just talked about, big migration changes that we're seeing, whether it's the influx of, we've seen a spike in immigration, obviously in all of Canada, but specifically here in BC. That's going to have an impact on the maps. We're seeing people trying to flee urban core to rural parts of the province to try and find a mortgage that they can afford. And to me, a lot of this change has literally occurred in the last 2 to 3 years. And so I feel like the map is going to change so quickly. It's changed so fundamentally for this election. But then, Hunter, I wonder if you have a perspective on what do you need to do between now? Let's pretend it's a 4-year cycle between election. Is that too long to wait to do an analysis of the map?
No, not to murder your analogy, but you have to figure out ways to see through like the fog of war, which is the fog of elections. And if you're doing it, to my earlier point, like 30 days before E-Day during the writ, you don't stand much of a chance. Like just a few weeks ago, I was looking at StatsCan has released new demographics by riding. So those have had super drastic changes across Canada. I was looking at how some of the demographics and ridings in Ontario have shifted. There's by-elections that occur that have huge implications for how more general elections are going to play out. Like we just saw the federal Liberals have 2 pretty significant losses on by-elections, and those are going to have significant impacts on federal election outcomes.
And if I could just add one thing to that, like maps are one part of it, but I think we also have to think about issue sets and how we identify issues, right? Like you used to be able to look at your local community newspaper and go, okay, well, this is what the community is concerned about. Well, with the reduction in media and those on the ground voices, I'm going to plug market research. Like, companies should be going into those battleground in those areas where there are swings of voters that decide elections, and really truly understanding what those issues are, because we can look at demographic data and we can guess and we can make inferences based on historical voting patterns and all those things. But when you start wholesale changing of demographics in neighborhoods and ridings, sometimes that's a little opaque, right? So looking at sort of the on the ground issues of each community becomes more and more important, and then layering that on top of a healthy map.